In this video we're going to understand the shape of tooth based on the crown of the tooth. I've got a skull here showing the teeth and also the morphology of the roots underneath, the shape of the roots here and all the blood vessels. But in this video what we're really worried about is the shape of the tooth that we can normally see above the gum line. So these here. I've got some oversized teeth in order to make it a bit easier to see what I'm showing. And the first thing we will need to sort out is the words that we're going to use to orientate the teeth in the mouth. We refer to the teeth as the upper and lower, not the top and bottom, so it's the upper teeth and the lower teeth. And we have words that describe the surface of the tooth that we're going to be looking at. So, the surface of the tooth that is towards the front of the mouth in any given place, so this surface of this big tooth here, would be the mesial. So mesial is the surface of the tooth nearest the front of the mouth. The surface of the tooth near the back of the mouth is the distal. So that is the surface of the tooth nearest back here. We also have a word for the surface of the tooth next to the cheek, and that is buccal. And that is all of the surfaces around here. And we also refer to in upper teeth the inside surface of the tooth next to the palate as palatal. In the lower, the surface of the tooth next to the tongue is lingual. Lingual from linguistics and the root of those words. So we have mesial towards the front, distal towards the back. We have buccal towards the cheek, and then palatal or lingual for the inside surface. The final words we use are occlusal for the occluding, the biting surface of the tooth, so that's the top surface of the tooth. And we also use incisal edge for the edges of the incisor, the cutting edges here. They don't have a flat space, they have a cutting edge, so we refer to it as the incisal edge instead. I'll just put these over here, and I've got some larger models of both the upper and lower. So this is the upper arch, so in the mouth actually it will go this way round. And we have two incisors, these are cutting teeth, and one canine. And we have two premolars and three molars in a normal adult. They're numbered in dentistry. We number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So your wisdom tooth, for example, we will refer to as your 8s. Your incisors are your 1s. So this is the mesial, this is the distal, and the buccal surface we're looking at here, and you're looking at the occlusal here as well. On the lower, it's the same arrangement. We have the same distribution of types of teeth. So this is half of the lower arch. This is the incisal. The incisors. So we've got two incisors, the canine, the premolars, and the molars. So we have two incisors, canine, two premolars, three molars. So it's the same distribution upper to lower. We can now take these teeth, and I've got them on the table in front of me. So we've got half an upper and half a lower, and we're going to look at the distinguishing features between those teeth so that you might be able to identify them rapidly. And there are little tips for each tooth that you could memorise in order to differentiate one from the other. So let's start with the incisors. The upper incisors are a fairly large tooth, and in the upper essential incisor is one of the largest teeth and most visible teeth in the mouth. The mesial, the front surface of the tooth, is a lot sharper than the distal. It's a lot, on this one it's overemphasised a little, but it's sharper here, distal here. The lateral incisor, which is the number 2 in the mouth, has the same pattern, but it's just a smaller version of the central incisor. So it's easy to identify because you can just have a look at the tooth, work out the sharper surface and the distal in the mouth, and orientate it the right way around. The next tooth is the canine, and the canine is easy to identify because it has one easy point here, and in the mouth the canine has the point, and it's usually not central. So the shorter surface is where we orientate the mesial. So if we look at a canine, look at the point, identify the shorter edge that you're looking at, and that is the mesial surface of this tooth. The upper canine is fairly broad and quite a square looking tooth. Just by comparison, I'll pull the lower canine up, and you can see it's a much more slender, slinky looking tooth. Both have the same morphology features, both have one single point with the shorter edge mesially, but one is a lot fatter than the slinkier lower. The next one that I want to pull out are the premolars. So here is the 4 and the 5. And the way to identify a premolar is two cusps, and the cusps are the bumps on the teeth. So on the premolars, they're fairly easy to identify. One bump, two bump, and it's a bicuspid in some textbooks. And the grooves between the cusps are called fissures. So in this case, we've got two bumps, two cusps, and we orientate it by looking for a groove in the mesial surface of the tooth where the 4 meets the canine. And it's called the canine fossa, which is the canine hole, and that's how we identify the 4 from the 5. So just to recap on the premolars, because it can be quite tricky, 2 evenly sized cusps, the 4 has a canine fossa or little groove where it goes next to the 3, the canine. The molars are a little trickier to identify one from the other until you can get your head round the distribution of the cusps. The 6 in the upper has 4 cusps, 1, 2, 3, 4, and additionally it may also have another cusp on the side of the tooth, which is called the cusp carabelli. Not everybody has one, it's a hereditary feature, but about 75% of people have it in some populations, down to about 35% in others. It varies quite a bit. But on this tooth, it's a little bump on the palatal side of the tooth. It can actually be as big as one of these cusps on here, it varies. But for now, we're going to ignore that. We have 4 cusps on this upper tooth. They are fairly evenly spaced on the buccal, and then the mesial surface has a larger cusp on the palatal, and then a little one distally. So the way to orientate this tooth in the mouth is we always look for the smaller of the cusps, and if we orientate the tooth around so that cusp is palatal and distal, it will only sort of lock in one way. It's like the magic key effect. We look for the identifying cusp and spin it round until it's in the right place. The 7, the second molar in the upper, is a very similar shape. In fact, it has 4 cusps again, no cusp carabelli, a lot rarer on the 7. It's possible, but extremely rare. So we look for 4 cusps, but everything starts getting a little bit more cramped as we go towards the back of the mouth, and distally, these cusps are a lot smaller. We end at the 8, the wisdom teeth, and by this point everything is getting really quite cramped, and the wisdom tooth, the 8, are often referred to in older textbooks as being triangular, or they use the word trigon. We've got 4 cusps just about, and you should be able to identify a little cusp in order to orientate it in the mouth if you were to look at them. But the 3 teeth together do fit quite well, and they have the same format of 4 cusps as we go distally. Looking at the lower arch, the similar rules apply, but they're slightly twisted. The lower incisors are relatively similar, but a lot smaller. In the mouth, if you were to look at them, if you look at a friend's, you'll see they're often quite heavily worn, so it's harder to identify these. But in these stylized teeth, the 1 has a sharp mesial edge, just like the upper incisors, and a smoother distal edge. The 2 is more fan-shaped. So we look for 1 tooth being fairly asymmetric and 1 tooth being symmetric, so that's the 1 and the 2. The canine, I already mentioned when we described the upper, but it has 1 point and a shorter mesial edge, and it's quite a slinkier looking canine, quite a slender tooth. The premolars are where we start getting the bigger differences. The premolars are very different in shape just superficially to look at. The 2 cusps that they have are not as evenly distributed, they're a lot smaller lingually. And also we don't have a canine fossa in the lower 4, but we do have this groove, this bifurcation of the cusp here that we can identify. The 5 is a little bit more contentious. It's often called a bicuspid tooth, bi meaning 2 cuspid tooth, but when you see, and particularly on these, it often looks like it has 3 cusps, and a lot of books they refer to it as a 3 cusp tooth. So it's quite easy to identify the 4, and the 5 is even easier. If you're looking at a tooth that has 3 cusps, it's more than likely a lower 5. The molars are very different to the upper. In the upper we learnt 1 pattern, and then it just got smaller as we went distally. In the lower molars we have a different pattern for the lower 6. It's the largest tooth in the mouth implant area, and it has 5 cusps. In fact, it's the only tooth to have 5 cusps, so if you've got a 5 cusp tooth in your hand, you know you've got a lower 6. It has 3 buccally and 2 lingually, and the tooth gets smaller as we go to the distal side of it, so you can spin it round and work out which way it goes. When we go to the 7, it only has 4 cusps. It's got a very evenly spaced distribution of cusps usually. It's got a sort of a cross in the middle, and it's quite easy to identify because of that. It's very different to the upper teeth with their different distributions in sizes. And then the 8 is the same, but getting smaller and often more cramped distally. Quite hard to differentiate the 7th and the 8 actually without sort of seeing them in context or in the mouth. Just a final word, if I pull up the lower teeth in this larger model, the lower molars do have a curved edge buccally, but they're quite straight on the lingual surface, and that's because that's where the tongue lives. So when you see the teeth, if you're lucky enough to get up close to some of these teeth, you'll be able to see that defining feature. A final thing now, and that's the identifying features of those teeth, but I'll just want to talk about how they fit together. Teeth fitting together is called occlusion. Occluding is the act of them meeting each other. And bringing back my models from earlier, the normal occlusion, the class 1 occlusion in what we call in dentistry the angles classification, is a class 1 is where the upper 6, the mesial cusp of the upper 6, meets the groove in the lower 6. So you can see this cusp here, when it comes all together, fits into this groove down here. It's possible in some people that this tooth is further forward of the lower 6, and we call that a class 2, and that often results in a pronounced overjet and a softer chin, or it can be behind the lower 6, and that results in what we call a class 3, a much stronger chin. At the front, the teeth might be edge to edge in relationship, or they might even cross over, and you get this very open bite effect. The final thing is what happens when the teeth move laterally. We put our teeth together and we move side to side. In a lot of people, the canines are the defining teeth when we do this. It's called canine guidance, and it's one of the reasons the canine has such a large root, because it has a lot of load to bear as we move laterally. The canine is protecting the posterior teeth. If we look at molars, they look like little chunks on a chocolate bar, each individual cusp, and it looks like they're ready to break off, which they could do. So the canines are doing their bit to protect the posterior teeth by making them disocclude. They're coming apart. Some people don't have this effect, don't be too worried. The alternative is that you guide on a number of teeth, a selection of the teeth as you move laterally, and we call that group function. A final word is not to go and look at your grandma's dentures to look at occlusion or tooth morphology. I've got a set of dentures here, and we'll look at them in more detail as we go through this course. But in dentures, we often use a different distribution of teeth, different sizes of teeth, different morphology of teeth, and the occlusion is also totally different in order to lend stability to the dentures in the mouth so they don't fall out when we're speaking. So that is a little introduction to the tooth shape and form and occlusion, and we'll be using this information as we go on into the course and talk to some of the specialists in the dental team.